Now let's come on to interplanetary subversion, because I think it's going on. And last year I was contacted by a researcher called Douglas Gibson, and he had been looking at many of the images that are allegedly taken from the surface of Mars by NASA's various landers and rovers over the years, and he's found these anomalies in them which suggest that they're probably being taken on Earth. So I looked at all of his evidence, and I gathered all that evidence and I put it into a 50-page document called A Hypothesis: The Opportunity and Curiosity Mars Rovers Are Situated on Earth. In other words, it's a hypothesis where I'm suggesting that they're actually fooling us with these images and they're not coming back from Mars. I'm not 100% on this, but we did put a lot of evidence together in 2 TV programs. Some of you may have seen those TV programs where we looked at a lot of the Mars rover images with a very, very critical eye. So just to summarize, in 1976, this was the first alleged unmanned craft which landed on Mars. It's called the Viking mission. There was 2 identical craft. They did a few soil experiments and they've sent back images. They're now basically mothballed or redundant. They're not functioning anymore, but they're allegedly still there on the surface of Mars. So through the 1980s and 1990s, they ran a couple of projects, and then in the mid-2000s we had the Opportunity and Spirit rovers. One of them conked out in about 2011, but the other one is still functioning today, or so NASA allege. We also had the Curiosity rover mission, which allegedly landed in 2012 to great fanfare. So this is the Curiosity rover, which is about the size of a car, and the Opportunity rover. These are supposedly still sending back images. Now in the program we looked at lots of images, and I'm going to show you a few of them in today's talk. This is one of them on the left. This is sent back by the Spirit rover, and it seems to show some kind of lichen or growth on this rock, and you can even see it in between the rocks. This is it compared to Earth lichen on the right. And remember what Brian Cox said in part 1, that we might find some kind of microbial life, i.e. life that you would look at through a microscope. Right? This is not microbial life. This is complex life on the side of a rock, if that's indeed what it is. We also looked at images such as this one, which Douglas Gibson asserts is some kind of vertebrae from a sea creature. He believes either a whale or a walrus. We looked at this image, a very interesting image, which was of a large panorama, but if you zoom into that red square, Douglas Gibson is convinced that this is some kind of rodent. Now, much of the rover testing was done at a place called Devon Island, which is the largest unpopulated island in the world in the Canadian Arctic, and native to that island are Arctic lemmings. And Douglas is convinced that that's what we're looking at here. He even points to this mark on the back of the neck being present in the image. Okay, now this image doesn't look very impressive to the untrained eye, but fossil experts are convinced that this is indeed a crinoid fossil taken by the Opportunity rover. And here's it compared to an Earth. This is an Earth crinoid fossil. You can see here where you've got these 2 sort of parts which meet, similar to the left-hand image, which has allegedly come back from Mars. Here's another comparison with an Earth crinoid and the Mars crinoid. Now, we also discussed the colours on Mars. This image here shows the colour calibration unit, because on some of the rovers, this is the Spirit rover, they have this little module, looks like a joystick, and it has these 4 lobes on it, and they are so that they can calibrate the colours correctly on their images. So this joystick, it should look like this in the photograph, with the blue, orange, green and brown lobes. But you can see in this image, if you zoom in on it, the colours are all wrong on these lobes, which is proof that NASA have used colour substitution in their images. And the big question is, why are they doing that? Why have they been doing that? Now, the image on the left here, this is the first image which came back from the Viking mission in 1976. And shortly after they put that out, they said, oh, we've made a mistake, it doesn't look like that. This is the real image, right? They said, oh, there's dust in the atmosphere, so we got that one wrong. So this is what it looks like. Now, in the hypothesis, we put forward that the reason why they're doing this is because this is probably taken on Earth, and it doesn't look enough like an alien planet. which is why they're messing with the colours. That's what we put forward in this hypothesis. What other reason would they have to keep making these Mars images look like they've got red sky and red soil, when we know they're messing with the colours? All right, now, after these programs aired, I was contacted by quite a few people. I got a lot of emails, and two of them academics attached to two different universities who were determined to go through my hypothesis and prove me wrong on all of the evidence and convince me that these craft were in fact on Mars, which I thought is interesting that they're going to such lengths. I think one of them was a geologist and the other one was some sort of microbiologist of some kind. So this guy here, he's taken this image that Douglas Gibson is convinced is some kind of vertebrae, and he's basically saying, well, this is all geology and it's just the way that the light is shining. Jury's out for me on this. Some of the other images that they did manage to explain away was the one that we said was a plank of wood. He did show images of other rocks which look similar, so the jury's out on that one for me. The other one was a walrus arm bone that we suggested. Now with that one he showed that the scale of the bone is too small, because he compared it to the tyre tracks of I think it's the Curiosity rover. All right, so some of them have been successfully explained away without a doubt, and I'm going to write another update to the hypothesis with all of this evidence in, because something which Dr. Judy Wood told me, author of Where Do the Towers Go, former professor of engineering mechanics, she said, Richard, you know what you do? You just chuck your evidence out to the skeptics and let them tear it apart and see what comes back, because then you'll get closer to the truth, because you'll find out the evidence that they can't debunk. Which brings us on to this image. Okay, so both of these scientists said that they thought that this was just a rock that happened to look like a rodent. Now, okay, that might be the case, because if you think about it, there are thousands, maybe even millions of images of rocks that they've published from Mars, so maybe one of them may just so happen to look like a rodent. So what this guy did was this, he said, well look, I've found another image taken of the same group of rocks from a different angle on a different day. And obviously a rodent's not going to hang around for 2 days, is it? So he's saying that you can see from this other angle that it's actually just two rocks, that your eye is tricking you into thinking it's some sort of rodent. So this was the image that he found, and he's saying that that rock there is this rock here, and that and that one there is that one there. Okay, so I agreed with him on that. If we zoom into them both, there's our lemming. Okay, so what he's saying is that this rock here is that rock there, and this rock here is this rock there. And he's claiming that this rock and that rock look like the lemming when viewed from this angle, if you see what I mean. And he's saying there's the nose of the lemming. Now, I actually think that there's a rock behind whatever this is there. It's a different colour, it's a different texture, yeah? So I think that that rock there is possibly that rock there. So I'm not sure that this object is in this picture. I don't know what everyone else thinks. Do you think that this object, whatever it is in that image and is actually these two rocks, or do you think it's missing? Because if this is a rodent, right, according to what they tell us about the atmosphere on Mars, it's less than 1% of the Earth's atmosphere. There's no way an animal with lungs that breathes could survive on Mars, right? So I emailed him back and I said, well, actually, I don't think the object is in this image, and I think you've proved me right. So I didn't hear from him after that. So I don't know. I mean, maybe we need some image analysis done on it. But I suspect that if that is a lemming, then it's clearly been taken on Earth. It's not been taken on Mars. But this is the clincher. This is much stronger evidence. I know it doesn't look as impressive, but believe me, it is. Because neither of these scientists could explain the image on the left. And they both said it looked like some form of biology. Right? So they're saying that this is a crinoid fossil, and it's allegedly come back from the Opportunity rover. So why isn't Brian Cox talking about that when he's speaking to these school children, that they've actually found life on Mars, according to this photograph? And here's the other comparison that I showed you before. And what is a crinoid? What is a crinoid that we have a fossil of in this image? A crinoid is a sea creature, swims about the sea. It's not a plant, has a skeleton, and attaches itself onto rocks and feeds and that kind of thing. So this is a fairly advanced life form that, according to the NASA images, existed on Mars at some point. But I question that. I question, well, is it just an image of an Earth crinoid? Now what I did was I sent links to the programs that I produced about Mars and asking all of these questions to 5 Mars rover NASA scientists. These have all worked on or are linked to the Mars rover programs. And I said, look, can you watch these 2 TV programs, because I want you to explain why is there a rodent in one of these images, why is there a crinoid fossil, I want an answer to this. So none of them replied, but in NASA there's actually 2 Robert Mannings. There's the one at the top there who's the Mars Curiosity rover chief engineer. So this is a top engineer on the Mars Curiosity program. And I sent my email to the wrong Robert Manning, who designs aerials or something. So he forwards my email to the other Robert Manning from the Curiosity rover program. So I get a reply from this Robert Manning, and I think the only reason why he replied is because he got the email from someone else in NASA. So this was his reply. And I'm going to publish all of these emails. He said that I occasionally get letters and email from goofy people, but you are not in that category. You and your colleagues are very intelligent, and at least so far the questions you pose are really well thought through. In fact, you all remind me of many of my colleagues. That is a good thing, by the way. At least for the questions you posed in the first 2 videos. Now, the first 2 videos were about 25 minutes. We didn't contain any of these images that I've showed you. We were questioning the electrical characteristics of the rovers in that part. He said, I believe I can answer most or all of them. I will caveat that by saying that I am short on time in the next couple of weeks, and I am a terribly slow typist. So written answers will not be quick. If you don't mind, would you be able to send me a list of your technical questions in priority order? It would inspire me to be a bit faster, and I can do a little at a time. So great. So we've got one of the key players on the Curiosity rover agreeing to answer all of my technical questions. So I replied to him, I said, many thanks for your reply. The first 2 parts of the show are background information looking at things which might be considered questionable. Parts 2 and 3 contain much better evidence that something is not what NASA is claiming, in particular the fossil identified by a NASA scientist as a crinoid. So I got together with Andrew Johnson and we drew up 25 technical questions for this engineer to answer. And this should be child's play for an engineer at NASA to address. So we're asking him all sorts of questions. Question 8 here, I'm asking him for signed off test procedures, because when you develop a new product, if it's going to work in a harsh environment, there's generally batteries of tests over months where you would, for example, take the rover down to minus 100 degrees C and then up to 20 degrees C and simulate its environment and simulate the atmospheric pressures and that kind of thing. So I'm asking for all of those test results to prove that it can function as they have claimed, because I don't think you can determine that from the design. It's in the test results. All right, Andrew's sending them links to images that Andrew's been talking about for years, anomalous images of Mars which have never been explained properly. And also here I actually mentioned the crinoid fossil. I'm saying, well, do you think it's from Earth? Why haven't NASA announced life on Mars if there's a crinoid fossil there? Okay, so he replies. He answered one question about how the batteries were kept warm. He said, in reading your list below, it really sounds like you are both a skeptic, a good thing, and that you have already made up your mind. Would that be correct? If your intent is not to listen with an open mind, I would have at the outset no chance to inform your curiosity and legitimate skepticism. What reason do I have to continue typing? So he answered one question, and I've never heard from him again. All right? And I've re-emailed him, said, Robert, come on, you promised to answer these questions. Now, in my job as an engineer, if I received a list like that, someone questioning my very existence, my very reason for getting out of bed in the morning, I'd want to prove myself right. So he's running away from the evidence, which is a common theme with people at NASA. So I've said to him, look, thank you for answering the question. We are skeptical. I can state 100% that neither Andrew nor myself are decided either way on where the rovers are. In fact, in the hypothesis, I state that on current evidence, I am about 75% the rovers are not on Mars. Andrew states quite categorically in the programme, I am not saying the rovers are not on Mars. Our minds are definitely not made up. We are genuinely open-minded. Being open-minded and willing to alter one's opinion according to new evidence is essential to get to the truth. And I've never heard from the guy again. Now, and here he is, Robert Manning, when they landed the Curiosity rover on Mars, because I really do recommend you watch this news conference, because their engineers are being asked pretty basic questions by journalists, and they don't know the answer to a lot of them. And they just look like a bunch of Hollywood actors, if you ask me. Here he is, hugging his pals. What's the ultimate goal of these missions? As you heard Brian Cox in part 1, the ultimate goal is to search for life, not to land the thing successfully. It's to search for life. So if they're having this huge party, this huge celebration, whooping at each other and giving each other high fives and cuddling each other, why aren't they having a crinoid party? We found the crinoid. We found the life. Why not? That's a massive question. And I think the answer is because this was not taken on Mars, it was probably taken on Earth. Because I think what's happening is that the team at NASA probably think the thing is on Mars, and the people who are in the Canadian Arctic steering it about or monitoring it, it's possibly accidentally come across this fossil and they thought, oh no, you've let it go next to a crinoid fossil. They're going to think there's a crinoid on Mars. And you know what they did with this evidence? Because the Opportunity rover has a device on it called a rock abrasion tool. They actually destroyed the whole thing. So, let's go and have a crinoid party after today's lecture, shall we? And NASA, as we know, stands for Never a Straight Answer. And if you look at the Apollo program as well, I've covered the Apollo program extensively on Richplanet, and there's huge question marks over what the Apollo program was really about, and the moon landings and all the rest of it. And in my opinion, I've held this view for quite some time now, that NASA is a cover organisation to pacify the public with regards to space, when the NSA, the National Security Agency, they're running the real space program, and they've got the real spacecraft. And they're not based on rockets either. They're silent, and they can go much further than people realise. NASA is a cover organisation, and that's why we get such crap from people like Robert Manning. All right. Now, over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, I've concentrated on what I would describe as reactive activism. In other words, I know that 9/11 is a lie, and I've tried to expose it, so I've reacted to something which has happened. I know that the London bombings are a lie, I've reacted to it, and I've tried to expose it. Derek Bird, Madeleine McCann, all of these incidents that I think the media have lied to us about, I've reacted to it. So it's reactive activism. And I'm wanting to have a little bit of a change of direction with Richplanet and go into a more proactive mode. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, somebody that I had on my TV show recently called Derek Willis is a good example of a proactive project, because in the 1990s he was building his own rockets, and he actually got one of them up to 5 kilometers in height. He was building another one, and he wanted to get it into orbit, but he was thwarted, which is quite an interesting subject to study, civilian space programs. This is people independent of government trying to get things in orbit. And it's very interesting to look at all of the groups that have attempted that, and they've all been knocked on the head. And the question is why? Now, Derek Willis here, what he's got in his hands there is a satellite, that's the actual size of the satellite, covered in solar panels. It's got HD cameras on it. This is a rocket motor. And there's a company in America which will actually launch your own personal satellite and put it in orbit. And Derek Willis is wanting to use the rocket motor to get it into a particular, very specific orbit, because he's convinced that there's an ancient alien satellite over like 12,000 years old or something, which came from the star system of Aldebaran. And he's wanting to go and try and photograph it. So that's an example of proactive activism. In other words, he's not reacting to something that's happened on the Earth. He's just doing his own research. Okay. And another example of a project that I'm launching, you may have seen my latest TV programme where I demonstrated the Stan Meyer's water fuel cell that I've been developing. And this is an alleged free energy device. So over-unity devices are devices which you can allegedly disconnect your home from the mains, plug it into your own over-unity device, and you can get power forever without actually having to pay an electricity bill. And similar for motor vehicles. Now, there are a number of people who are alleged to have developed over-unity devices over the years. and they've all either been suppressed, bought off, or murdered, or what have you. They've all been covered up in one way or another. So what this project will do is, I've got a list of alleged devices, and there are patents that you can look at, and I've had a lot of interest from quite a few engineers who want to help me in the project to try and build some of these over-Unity devices based on information which is available, and I'm intending to test them to see if there's any truth in the over-Unity technology. I don't know whether there's any. I don't know whether they work. Maybe they do. I don't know. But certainly, Stan Myers, I believe, was murdered because of his water-powered car. And as I say, we're looking to explore some of that, which is an example of proactive activism. So, thanks very much for listening today, and please do take this advice. Throw your television set out of the window. Believe none of what you hear, including me. Don't believe me. Believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night. Thank you.